Welcome back to the Upshots George Best special. At the end of part one, both George Best and Man United had sunk into a spiral that would drive them apart. So George is now more devoted to sex and booze than football. We're in 1974. He's walked out on the club, and his insatiable shagging appetite is about to land him in real trouble. I should say Zach and Vittorio are still here.
Hello.
It's been a week.
So it's 1978 now, and George is about to embark on a brief fling with another Miss World. This time it's American Marjorie Wallace. So she's actually engaged to an F1 driver, and she was also shagging Tom Jones and Jimmy Connors on the side, the tennis player.
Wow.
So she's very in this celeb world.
Wow.
But
I mean, that's the celeb world's in her.
So it certainly is. So her and George Best hook up as well. And he goes down to London to visit her, and they have this really nice day out, but back at hers, they get into a bit of a row. They have a big falling out, and he leaves the following day, goes back to Manchester, where police turn up outside his house. And it turns out she's accused him of stealing her fur coat and also her passport and her checkbook. So police turn his place upside down. He's he denies it. He says he hasn't stolen anything. Then the phone rings, and it's Tom Jones on the phone, who's threatening to fly over from the US to beat him up.
Is Tom Jones a scary guy? He's big. He's got a deep voice.
Burly.
Yeah,
He's very hairy, isn't he?
Yeah.
That is scary. He's a
I
bear.
think George Best is like a wee guy,
Yeah.
I
He's
don't think
a-
George
do you
Best
reckon-
is a
I
fighter.
reckon I'd back George Best in that.
He's
I
pretty
don't think
small.
George Best is a fighter. He doesn't
No?
strike me
Well,
as that whatsoever.
Yeah.
More of a lover.
He does. There is
does a bit of
there's
fighting around
a
this
couple of scraps coming
Ooh,
up. So yeah.
very exciting.
But anyway, this ends up in court somehow. They don't really have any evidence other than Marjorie's word that she did the stuff. Goes to court, he gets acquitted, and a random person ends up just mailing her stuff back to a newspaper, actually, weirdly. But yeah, on the pitch, he's going through a bit of a weird spell. So he does these short money spinner stints at various different clubs. The first one is the Jewish Guild in South Africa.
What?
Hang on, what year is this?
This is
apartheid
This is
South Africa.
this is
Apartheid South Africa,
this is
isn't it?
mid 70s. Yeah,
This is
That
wild.
is the apartheid, sporting ban
yeah,
era.
I
Maybe that's
guess,
80s when they
yeah.
banned people.
Yeah.
But it's also quite a weird. You're playing for Man United.
yeah, and you just
Surely, Hereford United or something.
yeah. Well, he does
Jewish Guild.
after that. He does a stint with Stockport County in the 4th division as
More
well.
like it.
Plays for Cork City and Ireland. These are quite random teams,
Yeah.
considering he's just been playing for Man United. Won the European Cup a few years ago.
Where do you see the Miss Worlds are from? Stockport, South Africa, and Cork. Those 3 years, he's just yeah.
I don't think any of them are from Stockport, to be honest. But yeah, he plays pretty terribly for all these teams. It's basically a money spinner for both him and the club. So they double their gate receipts, so they're happy.
Yeah.
And in 1976, a big money offer comes in from the LA Aztecs.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the era when US soccer was first kicking off. The New York Cosmos had Pele, and the Aztecs wanted someone to rival that. So he agrees to join them. And he has this meeting with the chairman where they're signing the contract, and the chairman asks him hey George, do you know any other British players that might be interested in joining? And he's probably expecting George to reel off a few of his old European Cup winning teammates, and George instantly replies, Bobby McAllendon. And the guy's Bobby McAllendon? Bobby McAllendon? I never heard of this guy. George says, oh, you know him. He played in midfield for Man City. Great midfielder. And the guy said, okay. Turns out this guy had played one game for Man City 12 years ago, had then done a year in the reserves for Port Vale, and had been working as a roofer in Stockport for the past 7 years. And he was just one of George's mates from the casino.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean,
Yeah.
get
He's
your
taking the
pals
piss,
over.
but-
Yeah, and the chairman was just yeah, great. I mean, he played for Man City. Let's do it. And he actually ends up doing pretty well.
That's so funny. Just
yeah.
gets his mate a gig.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah, it's
funny.
great. I looked at Bobby McAllenden's Wikipedia, and he has this like one game for Man City, then there's a 12 year gap. Then he does this like stint at LA Aztecs, and then he plays one game for Bournemouth at the same time as George Best is there.
Oh,
So he's just like
brilliant.
he's just chilling. He just chills with George Best.
Jewish guild.
That's
Yeah.
so fun. That's like what was the rumor that Harry Kane was trying to get Bayern to buy somebody just to be like pals with him?
Eric
Oh,
Dyer.
really?
Yeah.
Well, he's actually been quite
You
good.
just need a wee
Yeah.
buddy.
Wasn't there the
Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman
has
had a mate who moved with him to the Chicago Bulls because he was the only one who they were like he speaks fluent Rodman.
the Rodman whisperer.
That's funny.
Yeah, but anyway, they George and Bobby go off to LA and they have a great time there. They're just partying all the time.
And what age is George at this point? What year is this?
This is 76, so
He's 28.
Isn't this so mad? It's like still absolutely like
It's meant to be
yeah,
a peak.
in theory,
he
like
should,
the
he
peak
should
of his
still be
career.
great, yeah. But yeah, he's just partying all the time in LA. He can kind of get away with it there because the league's
MLS
just
is
shit.
dog
so,
shit, like,
yeah,
so bad.
especially at that point, it was just yeah, shit. So they're just partying. He's got this like multi-millionaire friend who has this bachelor pad in Beverly Hills that he's at all the time.
Yeah.
They're just like throwing parties. In his book he describes the parties as like the last days of Rome.
Wow.
So there's he's got a pool there. There's these like supermodels lounging naked by the pool, famous actors just like smoking joints, champagne on tap.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he's absolutely living the dream. It's actually at one of these parties that he meets Angie, who's his future wife. So she's English actually, but she's in LA working as Cher's personal assistant. And yeah, he meets her there. She very quickly moves in with him, and he says again that this is like one of the best periods of his life. He's just living
In LA,
the LA dream.
Yeah, my God. Do we know what money he was on in LA?
Yeah, $5,000 a week, I read. So shit loads.
Wow.
That is now.
That's
what
100
is-
grand a week.
Yeah, 100 grand a
or
week.
whatever.
Sort of money.
Yeah.
Fuck.
He
I
must
think
be
they're
like-
short seasons. It's like you do like a 3-month stint or something like that.
Yeah,
Not
so
exactly
so after the first season there, he's like having this great time in LA, but he's played alright, and he gets an offer to come back and play for Fulham for a year. And I think the contract is like he'll go there and then do a few months and then go back to LA. So he agrees. It kind of goes downhill pretty quickly though. He falls out with the chairman. Probably didn't help when he borrowed the chairman's daughter's Alfa Romeo and crashed it into a lamppost while pissed.
Big Ferris Bueller vibes.
Yeah, yeah. So after that and some questionable performances on the pitch, he decides it's probably best that he goes back to LA. So when he goes off, his two best mates at Fulham were Bobby Moore and Rodney Marsh. And when he leaves, he like tells Rodney Marsh that he's going. He's like, Rodney, is it all right can you just like look after my dog for the weekend? I'm literally just popping back. Like I'll be back on Monday. And Rodney's like, yeah, sure, of course, no worries. Comes back 18 months later.
Oh my God.
And apparently when he goes to meet Rodney and he's got his dog, he's like, there's your dog.
At the airport.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I would have given the dog up pretty quickly. I'm not doing
For
18
adoption.
months.
Yeah.
Or if you do keep it for 18 months, surely you're like,
You're quite attached to
this
it.
is
by
my
that point.
dog now.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he just hated the dog.
Yeah,
It's just a miserable. Maybe it was the George Best equivalent of dogs.
yeah.
Just
What makes
out
the
all the
fact-
time.
Waiting at the airport, like there's your fucking
Yeah.
dog.
But yeah, once he's back in LA, George settles back into this party lifestyle.
Mm.
He's having these benders, disappearing for days on end. He's still with Angie at this point, but he says that he's sleeping around a lot. This one time he gets back after a 3-day bender and comes into the kitchen, and Angie's obviously just like, where the fuck have you been? Like, I've been so worried. And he's like, don't worry, like it's fine. Is it right if you knock me up some food? And she just fairly loses the point and stabs him in the arse with a kitchen knife. To be honest, I think he probably had that coming.
Does she know he's shagging when he's going away?
You've got to assume.
Yeah,
You've got to
As if
assume.
it could just be boozy.
yeah, I don't know.
Nah,
I think she's probably got an inkling.
Yeah.
Hence the bread knife in the bum. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's driving her pretty mad at this point, but they decide anyway to get married. I think it's one of these like, if we get married, then he'll settle down.
Oh,
Which
that's such a
has
70s
that
point of
has
view,
that ever
isn't it?
happened? And yeah, it doesn't really go to plan. So the night before the wedding, him and Angie get smashed, and they have a massive argument. So they wake up the following morning, like really hungover. They've had this big row. Both of them are like, don't really want to go through with this wedding anymore. But you know, it's all booked.
Yeah.
So they decide to go ahead with it. It's in Vegas, so they fly over to Vegas and have this ceremony. And halfway through the ceremony, the priest like asks him for the ring, and George suddenly realizes, like, fuck, I didn't get the ring. So he has to borrow a ring from Bobby, good old Bobby. his
Good
mate.
old Bobby.
And yeah, so they manage to do the wedding. He goes, this being Vegas, he goes straight from the church to the casino. Very depressing, and loses big. And then after that, I don't know what Angie's doing at this point, but they then get a flight back to LA and get back to the house. Bear in mind, this is still the day of the wedding. This is their wedding night. He gets back and decides to go out for a little solo drink and gets back 2 days later.
A solo drink the night of your own wedding is
It's-
so
it's
wild.
It's very
Swift
depressing.
half.
Yeah. Which, you know, like if she was having second thoughts before the wedding,
Yeah.
like, what's she thinking now? And yeah, after this, like the drinking really spirals. So he goes and does a stint in Scotland with Hibernian.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not really taking it that seriously. Like he's living down in London. He's just partying the whole week and then flies up to the game on a Friday night. But like sometimes if he's having a good sesh, then he just won't show up.
Yeah.
There's one story of a time he did actually make it. So he's been put up in this hotel in Edinburgh the night before the game,
Mm-hmm.
and he's at the bar just having like a quiet nightcap, planning to have an early night, when the whole French rugby team walk in, and they've been playing Scotland at Murrayfield,
Yeah.
so they're just having their like post match piss up. And they're just like, oh, George, you must come and join us. We have a bottle of Bordeaux. You just have one little glass. So George can't resist that, and he has one drink, and then he has another, and it all starts to escalate. And then Debbie Harry, the lead singer of Blondie,
Yeah.
joins them, and that's when it starts to really get unhinged. So George says what happened next was bedlam. Although he then doesn't explain anything that happened, possibly because he has no recollection
Yeah,
of
oh my
it.
God.
The blackouts.
Yeah. But he was carried to bed at 10 a.m. by the hotel staff. And an hour later, the Hibs team bus arrived to pick him up for the game. And he's like passed out in bed with this blonde girl who, by some accounts, is Blondie, some accounts is not.
Yeah.
A member of the French rugby team.
Much more likely.
Probably was. But yeah, apparently the coaches come into his room. It's like, George, what are you doing? Like, you have to go. We have a game in a few hours. And he just looks at them and says, what would you rather do? Spend the afternoon with her or play Ayr United? Or him. Possibly him. Yeah. And,
So rude. And is he like, because my question was like, is he putting up any numbers for Hibs? Like, is he scoring goals for Hibs? Is like,
I think he didn't play that many games for them.
yeah. So
Aren't there like the odd moment of magic, but that's it?
I'm
Like,
sure,
it
yeah.
beats the odd defender.
yeah. We just go, oh.
Yeah, he's
and then-
phoning it in, isn't he?
Yeah. And after that, so he didn't make that game, in case you didn't guess.
Yeah.
And after that, they've had enough. They sack him. I think he does actually come back briefly, and then does it again and gets sacked. So yeah, eventually, like his drinking's really spiraling out of control, and Angie convinces him that it's time to go to rehab. He actually claims in his book that he ends up shagging his rehab counsellor, which.
What was his name?
who obviously is. And that's bound by confidentiality, so no one can check that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was quite what Angie had in mind when she packed him off.
Fuck's sake. Imagine outrage, and you'd be like, finally got him into rehab.
Yeah.
And he comes back and he's like, shagged her. Isn't that good?
What's for dinner?
It is like, he probably did loads of it, but it's really like Jay from In-Betweeners vibes. We're like, yeah, shagged her as well.
Yeah.
Just anyone he sees on like, this is why it's always Miss World. There's like a bus goes by with an ad campaign. He goes, I shagged her as well. Shut up.
He does briefly get on the straight and narrow. So in 1981, he has his son Callum, and that like having a kid briefly like kicks him into gear. He's like, I need to kick the booze, but yeah, it doesn't last. And Angie finally leaves him the following year.
Callum of Celeb Big Brother
Yeah,
fame.
and
Yeah.
original Love Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a weird. He's now more sort of like crypto muscles.
He's a
gone that
weird
way.
looking guy. Like, he was very good looking in his.
Yeah, but he was more
youth.
sort of, we were saying like Jude Law-esque, and now he's
Yeah.
like, he looks like he's gonna flog you some obscure crypto.
Yeah, he looks like someone who would own a like non-league football club.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
but
sign,
listen,
like Jamie O'Hara.
You don't come out normal if your dad's a
Nah, I think he's
closeted
done
gay
well.
alcoholic.
Yeah.
Could have been worse.
I was reading about him yesterday that he did a show for a while where he gave up sex. That was his whole thing, because he was seen
He
as
was a
like
big
he was like a
shagger
big
as well.
shagger,
Yeah.
and then he did some kind of like reality show where he went 50 days. I think it was like no sex, no wanking for 50 days.
Oh, no wanking as well.
Wow, 50 days.
Yeah, after that, George's next girlfriend is the star of Octopussy and Miss World, Mary Stavin.
It's such bullshit.
This one I kind of do believe, because there's a
Yeah.
few other like encounters that they have. So she's got a bit of a history with footballers. She went out with Graham Souness before.
Great.
Great choice.
Now,
Great.
like, you look at Graham Souness, it's like, how are you ever dating?
I
Miss
think he's
World?
considered quite
Yeah.
smooth with the ladies,
Yeah,
Graham
yeah,
Souness.
yeah,
Even
handsome guy.
not now.
He's got the stern, sexy stern look.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went out with Don Shanks as well. Apparently, these are all just like names from
Yeah.
80s football that I have no idea.
I
who
believe
Don
he
Shanks
exists.
is.
Yeah,
but you
it's-
kinda know what he
he
looks
is-
like
he
in
is-
your
he is a
mind.
name,
Yeah.
yeah, he's got a mullet probably. Yeah, apparently George Best and Don Shanks had a punch up in a hotel foyer after she hooked up with George. She seems quite protective of her. So there's another story. Michael Caine was rude to her in a nightclub, and George decked him. Possibly another made-up story. From
Yeah,
George.
no, Michael Caine apparently agrees it happened.
George, why have you done this?
You disrespected me. Mary Stavin is actually the star of another famous George Best story. So he'd been out at the casino one night with Mary, and he's won 20k, and they come back to the hotel, which weirdly is Holiday Inn in Birmingham. I think possibly
Must have been better. At
I
the
think-
Yeah,
time.
it's one
yeah,
of
I
those
think
things.
Must
like
have been
Wimpy.
better.
It's
Wimpy
gone
was
downhill.
cool. Yeah.
They get back to the Holiday Inn, and George spreads this like 20 grand in cash all over the bed, and he calls down to the hotel lobby and orders a bottle of Dom Perignon, which suggests that Holiday Inn has gone downhill. since
Yes,
those
yeah,
days.
yeah.
Good point.
And the bellboy comes up and brings him this bottle, and George describes it quite well in his book. So I'll just read this passage. He placed the champers and the glasses on the table, and they looked over at me, and the money spread out across the bed. He then looked over at a partially dressed Miss World, brushing her hair like a beautiful mermaid. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Best?" he said with a look of genuine pity. "Where did it all go wrong?"
Yeah. That's the famous George Best story, isn't it?
Yeah, which you
Yeah.
can imagine. Like George Best is in there with like 20 grand in cash spread out. He's just ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon. Miss World is in bed waiting for him, and someone's like, "Where did it all go wrong?" It's like, fuck off. Like,
What the fuck are you talking about?
But he's kind of right.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of sum him up. It's like people still see him as having like thrown away this incredible
Yeah,
talent.
I guess the thing is like he won everything he could have won so early, like trophy wise.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? So it's not even like it's one of those like, oh, what could he have achieved? He kind of
Well, yeah, okay. Never won the FA Cup, which was a big deal then, and
Yeah.
never got to the final. And Northern Ireland qualified for the 1982 World Cup, and he's considered, but they're like, you're just fucking around
It's
doing
just
these
no way.
paydays, so you're
Yeah,
not playing
yeah.
for us. And you wonder, like, he often says that. So, and he would have won far more.
yeah.
if only he'd been ugly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
he got to see Miss World brushing her hair like a beautiful mermaid.
What a
It's
dream.
quite a camp
Very
compliment to pay a Miss
gay
World,
yet
isn't it?
again.
Got lovely hair.
You kind of see why he'd just be like, "Fuck."
Yeah, you'd be
Yeah,
annoyed.
what are you talking
Apparently,
about?
also, I read that story. The
It's a bit of a
guy,
turn-off.
the porter who came up, brought himself a glass as well.
Yeah, he came up with 3 glasses.
Yeah,
Very funny.
Who do you think you are?
take my drink and then insult me. Yeah.
Can't rate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, George, in this sort of early to mid 80s, he does a few more random stints with clubs, does a spell at Bournemouth, and then retires in 1984. And later that year, he ends up in the slammer. So he gets done for drink driving one night, and the police turn up to arrest him. And as they do, one of them shouts an Irish slur at him. So he headbutts this policeman in the face. Deserves it, I think. But anyway, the court
Which
doesn't.
Irish
The court doesn't
slur?
agree. I think it was. Do I? No.
Go on.
No, actually,
Let's
it was.
hear your
I think.
top three Irish
he
slurs.
said. I think he just called him like he was like, "You're a piece of Irish dirt."
Yeah. I'd
Which-
headbutt someone for that.
Yeah, I think he deserved it.
Yeah.
But the court decides he deserved 3 months in jail for it.
The court didn't sign with the Irish person in the 1980s.
It's
What the
unbelievable,
fuck?
really. Yeah, it was sort of one of those rogue cases where they didn't.
Listen,
Yeah.
there's been a
Can't
lot
win
of
'em all.
mad stuff happening in here, but I don't believe that for a second.
It was weird. I think he was as shocked as we are. Yeah, he ends up spending Christmas that year in Pentonville prison.
Wow.
He's only actually there for a week though, and then gets sent to this open prison, which is way more chill. Like he says he gets takeaways, like the delivery boy will like throw takeaways over the fence to him.
Unreal.
And it was an open prison.
It's an open
you can
prison.
Just walk out.
You can
can't
walk out, yeah.
What's the point of that?
But while he's in there, he gets a letter from some loyalist paramilitaries who write to him saying they're going to come and break him out of prison. So George gets called in by like the prison warden or whoever it is, and they get this letter. It's like, George, we've received a letter that these loyalist paramilitaries are threatening to break you out. And he's like, what? Like, this is literally an open prison. I could walk out the door right now.
So
Like, we
embarrassing.
spent a year digging a tunnel.
Fucking paramilitary
Into
is
the exercise
so
yard.
cringe.
just try the
oh
front
my
door,
God.
lads.
Imagine being in the middle of a war and being like, let's break George Best out of not a prison.
Why?
Good God. That's so funny.
They're just parading.
Dunno,
March.
dunno, yeah.
Just make him an absolute like kidnapping target. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fucked.
While he's inside, so he's got a new girlfriend before he goes into prison, and while he's inside, they exchange these like really horny letters explaining what I'm going to do to you when I get out. I bring it up because in his book he describes it as postal sex.
Postal sex.
Analog sexting.
So
Yeah.
good, yeah.
You've got to wait like 3 to 4 business days to come. Please send it first class.
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. He does eventually get out though after a few months and settles into a pretty lucrative life of after dinner speeches and relentless boozing at these dinners. And he says it's just such easy work. Like he just reels off a few Man United stories, cracks a joke and gets paid like 10 grand. So easiest work he's ever done. He also, during these speeches, perfects his famous line, I spent a lot of money on booze, birds and fast cars. The rest I just squandered.
Yeah.
Another good line.
Sounds like
Is he writing these? Because they are good.
They're real zingers, aren't they? Yeah.
Normally,
I don't know.
if you've ever watched after dinner speeches by footballers, they promise a lot, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
you're not a talker.
Yeah.
I guess he is.
Yeah, I kind of feel, is he? I mean, he's got so many good quotes, but
Yeah, but I guess he
have
came up
they
with them.
been? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Possibly thanks to those zingy one-liners. In 1990, he gets invited on Terry Wogan. And, this is quite a big deal at the time. It's like the biggest chat show on TV,
Yeah.
but it's an absolute car crash. So he spends 3 hours getting absolutely battered in the green room before, comes out, like he can hardly string a sentence together. And Terry asks him about all the women that he's been with. And George slurrily replies, well, I like screwing, Terry. And Terry suddenly just basically cuts the interview off.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
and ladies and gentlemen, George Best. And it's
You hear. I actually like somebody being super like incoherently drunk on a TV interview is just like
That's sad.
the whole
Yeah.
time. You're just like fuck.
Yeah.
that interview
That's
is
so
quite
bad.
sad. Like I
Yeah.
watched the whole thing, and he only does 4 minutes,
Yeah.
and it's I don't know, he can hardly string a sentence
Yeah.
together, and he's just like eyes glazed. It's a bit sad.
Grim.
But despite that, he gets into punditry then on Sky. So yeah, I don't know. You think you see his last TV appearance, he's not the first pick.
Yeah.
But he does that for best part of a decade, really. And in the mid-90s, he also meets Alex Percy, who's a Virgin air hostess.
For what airline?
Capital B.
Yeah,
So that's Alex Best, right?
That's
Yeah.
Alex Best. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Couldn't possibly comment on her levels of promiscuity, but she's working for Virgin Airlines at the time.
How old?
She's 22. He's 49. Which, yeah, it's a bit weird.
And by this point, he's not a charmer. But I guess fame just goes a long way for you.
Yeah.
I think he's
doesn't it?
probably got still a good bit of money kicking about.
And a twinkle in the eye, maybe? Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, she's actually a pretty good influence on him. So she manages to sort of try like curb his drinking a little bit. But by the early 2000s, these decades of boozing are really catching up with him, and he catches pneumonia. So the doctors decide that he needs to have a liver transplant. And, this is obviously a big procedure, and the doctors tell him, you might be waiting for a while. There's a very long waiting list for this. And the guy who's in the next door bed to him in the hospital overhears this conversation and just pipes up, says, "Doctor, the man lying there in that bed is my hero. He can have one of my livers. Take one, now." And the doctor's like, excuse me, sir.
That's so funny.
You only have one liver, sir.
That's class.
Yeah. To be fair, like George is he's pretty funny about the whole liver transplant episode. He talks about it in his book. He says that during the operation, his balls swell up. Which I think it's something that happens when you have a transplant. But he says that, like, to begin with, it was quite funny. It's like, hey, look, my balls are massive. But after like another 12 hours, it's like they're like the size of melons. He's in agony.
Oh my God.
And yeah, so he has this transplant, and afterwards he gets out and he basically just carries on drinking. Like, it's pretty depressing. And
New game, new lives.
Yeah, it all catches up with him. And in 2005, he has some sort of like complications with the liver basically, and dies in 2005. Very sad. Actually, just before he dies, he invites the News of the World in to photograph him. That you've probably seen this horrible picture of him looking very like jaundiced in his hospital bed, and they publish it with the headline "Don't die like me." So he basically wanted
Put
to
out like a warning.
a warning. There's like a message about.
So he had
not drinking.
regrets. I mean, obviously, but
Yeah. And that was.
how old was he? Like 53.
He was
or something?
59.
Okay,
Which, to be fair, for that lifestyle,
not bad.
isn't that young. Like,
Yeah.
for how
He had a
early
good
it
run.
absolutely could have been. Yeah,
Yeah,
God.
I don't know how good the last 10 years were.
No,
Yeah.
a rough last 10, you would say.
Yeah.
Although he did have a new wife, and so George he's obviously sadly no longer with us, although not everybody is entirely convinced of that fact. So his ex-wife Alex, the one he married in the 90s, claims that she's been haunted by him for the past 20 years. So she cites a few spooky goings on.
Okay.
For example, her phone charger went missing. The shower switches on sometimes by itself.
Okay.
These are the kind of things that are just completely inexplicable by issues with plumbing or
Paranormal.
anything like that. But she ends up going on Celebrity Most Haunted to explore this supernatural world she's living in, and they capture footage. They put cameras up in her house, and they capture footage of a book flying out of her bookshelf, and they go to pick it up, and guess which book it is? It's George Best's autobiography,
Oh my God.
which is irrefutable proof.
Yeah, good enough for
That
me.
he is a ghost, and it was definitely not a producer with fishing wire.
To be fair, he was always a spirit man.
Excellent. So I mean, like, you can who knows whether Alex is on something. She's definitely a believer, although there are a few signs that she might be a little bit wet behind the ears. So she went on This Morning a few years ago, and she's chatting about like her house being haunted by George Best, and she also gets onto the subject of visiting a medium who'd helped her to contact her dead grandmother. So we can just watch the clip.
But then I saw one recently, and he said, your grandmother Jean says hello. Well, how does he know my grandmother was called Jean?
Did they look you up on the internet?
Well, it's possible, isn't it? I
He
mean,
lives in America, and I don't think my grandmother's just been dead 20 years. So I don't
What
know.
do you think when people say, well, he could...
They got the internet in America, haven't they?
It's her face when she tells that. She's like,
Like rolls her eyes.
she lives in America.
The fuck are you talking about?
It
How
wouldn't be
is
on the
she-
American internet.
Yeah.
It's great. We'll do an Alex Best episode at some point.
Yeah.
When we're scraping the old barrel. All right, so I guess we should just sort of pass some sort of verdict on his life. My question for you is, if you were living his life, basically at what year does it stop being fun?
Maybe, I think when he comes back from LA, I think LA is the good time.
LA does seem like fun
Maybe
in that way. I mean, I'm just so not like a party lifestyle person that like as soon as he stops like being good at football, the thing he's amazing at, that's where I'm like, and stop there. Like,
Well, so basically the Man United
yeah, it's
1970.
like, win the European Cup and like, be amazing at the thing that you have an unbelievable gift for. And it's just like, yeah, great, you can shag. Loads of people fucking shag. Like, it doesn't, not everybody gets to do that. And that's his whole thing of like, well, I did both actually. So I get it. I don't know, like, look, live fast, die young. He's kind of the epitome of that. And if that's what he wanted to do.
Live fast, die slowly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
slowly,
die
cirrhosis of the
unbelievably
liver.
slowly and
He
painfully
kind
with
of should have
giant
died earlier
balls.
to make good on that, I think.
Yeah, if he'd really,
yeah.
if he'd like chopped it and like died
80,
in like
early
a big,
80s.
if he died in that like Alfa Romeo crash or something,
Yeah,
that would have been pretty.
That
sick.
would have made him like a sort of James Dean, Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, well, he could have done the 27 club because he'd like achieved
Yeah.
everything by then, like 27.
I also, the thing, we didn't really cover it, but towards the back end of Man United onwards, he's like a bit of a hate figure in the press because everyone thinks he's a waste.
Yeah,
And so he says, like, every time I go to the pub, there's some bloke abusing me, which is why he loves America, because no one knows who he is.
yeah, that's why people go to LA. Is
Yeah,
like he just
to
aren't
escape it.
famous, basically.
So I think it stops being fun quite early.
yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Would
and
you-
then he's also just haunted clearly by like the disease of alcoholism. Like he
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
completely, that's on his back from. And I think it's like, it's classic of that like shy, homesick guy who just became completely dependent and clearly had like a lot of anxiety or any of that stuff, and just completely dependent on getting like ripped up, but making it seem cool the whole
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like, no, a lot of this is like really quite.
Yeah. I think
Grim
he
and
accepts
sad.
it gets sad.
We did a episode about the Tuesday Club, the Arsenal era of the 90s, and that was very similar. Like Tony Adams and Merson, like they
Merson's
both said
doing-
as well that they were just like very nervous teenagers who just like
I mean, that's why people
started,
drink,
like-
isn't it? Like, it's why
Yeah.
people get
Yeah.
hammered on like, nights out.
Yeah.
Merson's like doing coke on his own in the taxi to training, and
Yeah.
at that point you're like,
Yeah,
stop being
what
fun.
the fuck? Like,
Would you want George Best's life? I don't think I would.
no, I'm happy. Like I just don't care about that fucking like collecting Miss Worlds. Like they're
Yeah, but the
fucking
football.
panini stickers. The football's cool, grand, but like for how many years? 5?
Well, 10. Well, I guess he leaves United, he's 27 or 28, and he starts at 17, so yeah.
So yeah, 10
Decade.
years.
And then,
yeah.
But then like I would say probably like 7 years
But you know,
of good
Bruce
football.
Forsyth's daughter, Debbie.
Oh fuck right, yeah, I forgot about Debbie Forsyth.
The daughter of the last woman to be hanged in Britain. It's worth it just for that.
All right, I think that's all we got time for. Vittorio loved it. Hope
Listen,
you have too.
great fun. That's actually just a very enjoyable way to learn about somebody.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we're doing Nelson Mandela next week. So
similar vibes, also gay.
closeted.
What was he up to in that? What was he up to in that prison?
All right, well, come on again. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, that'd be so fun. I'm around anytime. Hopefully less hungover next time.
And follow Vittorio at Vittorio Angelone.
Watch my jokes on the internet
We'll link
and
to
listen
it
to
in
my
the-
podcast, Mike and Vittorio's Guide to Parenting.
All right, we'll link to both in the show notes. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks for listening.